for her collection on the top floor of 130 West 57th Street. Andre Breton and Howard Putzel had persuaded Peggy that Frederick Kiesler was the ideal man to create the physical setting for her gallery museum. His plans for the project were indeed breathtaking.
Until 2 days before the opening, not even Max was admitted. At first he balked about having all the frames removed from his paintings, but when he saw how well all the others looked, he decided not to be different. The surrealist gallery had curved walls made of gumwood. The unframed paintings, mounted on baseball bats, which could be tilted at any angle, protruded about 2 feet from the walls. Each one had its own spotlight. The lights went on and off every 3 seconds, to everybody's dismay, first lighting one half of the gallery and then the other. The publicity we got was overwhelming, and photographs appeared in all the papers. 14 of Mac's paintings and collages were on exhibition, more than those of any other painter. Naturally, as I owned so many. At the opening, Max looked very happy.
An unforgettable event was a photo session in 1942, New York Artists in Exile, that lasted from lunch way past dinner. The result was a much-published assembly of 20th century masters, not unlike a standard high school graduation photograph. The atmosphere was explosive. The faces were somber and self-important, with the exception of that of the class joker, Max Ernst, up front and center, which wears a distinct smirk, as if in secret judgment on the rest of the gang. On his right, Tanguy, on his left, Chagall and Léger, then Matta, Breton, Zadkine, Masson, Ozonfon, Chelychev, Lipschitz, Seligman, Berman, and Mondrian. Marcel Duchamp was present as a mere observer, because I have stopped being an artist and now only play chess. He whispered to me what they might have thought about each other. Léger, a proletarian? He's nothing more than a petty bourgeois horse-meat butcher. Chagall would cover his grandmother with cerulean blue paint if he could sell her for dollars. Unfortunately, I was not so familiar with the objects of derision then. But I was rather disturbed watching these eminent artists behave like Hollywood starlets.
In 1946, a Hollywood movie company invited famous American and European artists to participate in a competition on the subject of the temptation of St. Anthony. Max Ernst describes his entry as follows.
Shrieking for help and light across the stagnant water of his dark, sick soul, St. Anthony receives as an answer the echo of his fear, the laughter of the monsters created by his visions.
The jury, which comprised Marcel Duchamp, Sidney Janis, and Alfred Barr, the director of the Museum of Modern Art, justified the award of first prize to Max Ernst as follows.
The Ernst painting presents a St. Anthony in the throes of extreme subjective torment. Horned and crustaceous, a cross between the most revolting, distorted features of animal, bird, reptile, and human form, preys upon him with vindictive, perverse, and gleeful greed. Only after the hypnotic spell of horror is somewhat shaken off does one notice in the middle ground the presentation of the theme of sacred and profane love. In the lush center, the figure of an earthly temptress, and high on a pedestal, the figure of woman exalted. In the opinion of the confirmed surrealist, this painting is nevertheless in the great tradition of German medieval art, but as a thoroughly contemporary version.
Then I met a young woman in America, or rather in New York, the painter Dorothea Tanning, and very soon she became my wife.
It was around Christmas in 1942 when Max rang my doorbell. He was choosing pictures for the Peggy Guggenheim Gallery for a show to be called 30 Women. On an easel was my self-portrait, not quite finished. He looked, while I tried not to. At last, what do you call it? I really haven't a title. Then you can call it birthday, just like that. He had come to stay. That we were both painters, visionaries, did not strike me at the time as anything but the happiest of coincidences. It was so unbelievable, I told myself, yes, if it only lasts 3 weeks, it is still all right. Why do artists remain in cities? Must they chum with collectors, attend openings, witness name-droppings in Upper East and West Side pastures in order to make good pictures, good objects, good anything? No. We did it the other way. In 1946, Max and I embarked for the second time on a long trip. This time we take everything. Canvas, stretchers, paint and the totem pole, the Kachina dolls, the pictures. We want to return to Sedona, Arizona, where we'd already spent a summer. But this landscape is not one to be forgotten after one summer. This time, we want to stay and build a house.
So beschlossen wir, in ein Land zu ziehen, das ich schon unterwegs kennengelernt hatte.
So we decided to move to a part of the country which I had already seen during the course of our travels, Arizona.
Die auch in meinen Bildern.
There I found the old familiar landscape that had continually been in my mind's eye, and which had repeatedly appeared in my paintings too.
Prophetische Gabe von mir war.
Now I don't pretend that this was the result of some cheap prophetic gift of mine. It was sheer accident that the landscape was there, and that my pictures were there, and had emerged at a point in time before I had ever seen the landscape. You might call it the result of hasard objectif, or objective chance, which was how Breton explained it at any rate.
Dort führten wir ein wunderbares Leben.
We had a wonderful life there. It was absolutely marvelous. Words fail me when I try to describe it.
Das Klima war wundervoll. Die Leute, die man dort antraf, waren.
The climate was wonderful. The people we met there were so different from the sophisticated people in New York, you know.
So verschieden.
They were simply terrific. Cowboys or artists. People like myself, who had gone there to get away from it all.
Oder Künstler, die, wie ich, sich dahin zurückgezogen haben.
Sedona is the other way, and these are incomparable years. We cook in the open, on stones, on wood fires. We build the house of wood, for there is no water. At the lumber company, Max chooses from among the warped and knotty 2x4s green lumber of wartime. We played house. In the end, we had a house with windows that opened and closed, where finally he could sit in the captain's chair and open a beloved book and read as if nothing had happened, as if nothing had been squandered, nothing taken away. He had simply bridged time and space. we chase away the animals from our 5 tomato plants. We stand our ground in sudden confrontations with scorpions, centipedes, tarantulas, black widows, and, in the broom closet, a snake. When electricity finally blooms, we are exultant. Our phonograph plays Stravinsky on 78s, very loud. Nature was not always open-armed. There might be a week of red wind tearing at our wooden house, keeping us inside. Then there were days when there were no sounds in the afternoon save the hum of the heat. It was so intense, so lurking, so aged, that we, the intruders, felt also quiet, intense, and strangely tiptoe, as if in peril. Down in the valley, the gushing waters of Oak Creek provided refreshment. To the native Indians, it was sacred. Or 5 o'clock saw the sun dip behind our hill, and in half an hour the temperature dropped 20 degrees. Crystalline air drawn into burned lungs produced somersaults of energy. We pounded, wrestled, scraped, dragged, swabbed. Making art is not a silent affair. An abiding image of that time is of Max, hammer in hand, crating pictures. It is a fragile thing, the painted canvas. How securely it has to be fitted and fastened, nothing touching its skin. A helpless baby born of mind and gesture. Between Sedona, Arizona, and New York City lies most of the USA. 2,500 miles were spun out and counted by our old Ford 8 times in 12 years. Each time, a 2-wheeled trailer carried a load of pictures under its tarp. Each time, because the beautiful, hapless pictures often went both ways, going and returning, only minus 1 or 2. It was a great day when water was brought from under the hill. Now we only had to turn a spigot. So that next day, Max could begin a monument to our Capricorn Hill. A king and queen in cement and scrap iron. Regal guardians for our house. What else could he call it but Capricorn? Now that we had electricity and water, our little two-roomed house underwent a metamorphosis. The small hut made from brown boards with its tarboard roof was transformed by Mac's own hands, stone by stone, into a solid artist's studio. Max had always wanted to see the mysterious ritual Hopi dances, which took place at irregular intervals on the Table Mountains, the first, second, or third mesa.
Au pied de la mesa, la première chose qu'on a vue, c'était une église.
At the foot of the mesa, the first thing we saw was a church. A priest was just coming out of the church, and he was obviously in a huff because only one of the members of the tribe who had been commanded to come to his service had actually appeared.
Le prêtre disparaît à toute vitesse, n'est-ce pas?
The priest beat a rapid retreat. So then we asked the Indians whether they were Christians.
Qui avait servi la messe. Vous êtes chrétien ici? Alors il me regarde un peu avec un sourire qui me paraissait un peu louche. Il me dit, non, nous ne sommes pas chrétiens, nous sommes catholiques. Les unis qui habitent par là, eux, ils sont chrétiens. Ils dansent avec des masques. Nous sommes catholiques. Nous dansons sans masque.
The Zunis, who live over there, they're Christians. They dance with masks on. We're Catholics. We dance without masks.
About 150 miles north of Sedona, the earth splits open to form the enormous abyss of the Grand Canyon.
Ich hatte einen sehr starken Eindruck von der amerikanischen Landschaft.
I had a very strong impression of the American landscape, of the incredible beauty of the American landscape, and of the incredible diversity of the landscapes there.
Shortly after crossing from Arizona into Utah, we experienced the grandiose spectacle of Bryce Canyon. Max only ever made one attempt to depict this unforgettable experience. You would think that the story ends here. You would think that nothing would come after those velvet nights and days in a landscape so charged that we said, if Richard Wagner had seen this, his music would be even louder than it is already. Precious as diamonds is the memory of a 9-day river passage through the Colorado River Rapids. A Paradise Lost. It was all right there along with the phantom presence of Indians, eyeing us from up there on their rim or lurking in cave and cranny, uneasily. Because it was theirs, and even at this late date we were intruding. Arriving at Lee's Ferry 2 days late, we had played at movie making in a hidden canyon. We were hailed with relief by the locals. And our movie footage was nicely integrated back in New York in Hans Richter's avant-garde film, 8x8.
Die Möglichkeiten der Bauernumwandlung müssen wohl erwogen werden, denn sie können die Physiognomie des Spiels völlig verändern.
The king said, "Lady, now what game will you play?" "Friend," quoth she, "at the usual game, to be mated in the corner." And then the king began to study his first move.
We drove 500 miles non-stop across California to Max Ernst land, the Oak Creek Canyon of Arizona. We wanted to win him over to take part in an exhibition in our newly opened Copley Gallery in Beverly Hills. Next to Marcel Duchamp, Max Ernst was the most exciting name we knew. Duchamp's telegram announcing our arrival, however, got badly garbled at the Sedona country store, which was the only faucet from the outside world. Max had been expecting Duchamp himself. It showed on his face as we climbed out of the car. Nevertheless, we were invited in with what almost seemed like enthusiasm. Like Man Ray, Max Ernst was in his own way another exile hermit. His paintings weren't moving, and his only neighbors were cowboys. The nearest old friend was Man Ray, far away in Los Angeles. The last time they'd been together, they'd gotten civilly and doubly married. All described it as pretty much of a lark. Otherwise, Max was cut off from his peers. We stayed several days, eating, drinking, and vying with each other to make the most outlandish joke. Max always won, but he had 2 other languages to work puns on. It was his court, and we were his jesters. There was no trouble about a show. We escorted Max from Sedona in his Ford and trailer full of paintings. The Ford had been around for a long time and conked out every hour or so. Max would get out and frown at the motor. Would always start up again under his gaze. He grew flowers this way, too. Our show was the first retrospective of Max ever held. It was composed of over 300 pieces. We borrowed wherever we could. Germany, France, England. It never occurred to us that anyone would refuse. And oddly, nobody did. We had Rhenish Night. We had the Triumph of Love. Julien Levy lent nearly all the paintings he had. Jolas and Pierre Matisse lent. Walter Arenberg lent. Roland Penrose in London lent everything he had. Marie Laure, the Viscountess of Noailles, lent her 2 great bird monuments. An exhibition within the exhibition, a sort of register aria of the artist, was the large format painting Vox Angelica, the Flute of Angels.
A Noah's Ark built of compartments, a container into which at the time Max Ernst placed a lading that consisted of a good part of his world and his philosophy. All of the artist's themes and subjects are collected here, as well as all the techniques and moods that characterize his oeuvre. In the interstices, there appear the ghostly outlines of the Eiffel Tower and the Empire State Building. And counting all the dividing lines, which are drawn with a T-square, one arrives at a total of 52 compartments. And Max Ernst was indeed 52 years old at the time. He painted this picture in a tiny cabin, which was located, as he once said, on the cheapest lot he could find in Sedona, Arizona. What is striking about the painting is an alternation of rhythms which creates equilibrium, an alternation of short, small images with long, large images, which have the effect of fermatas. And this musical element in the painting, this alternating rhythm, was first discovered by a composer, Stravinsky.
Igor Stravinsky saw the picture at our exhibition in Beverly Hills and wrote an enthusiastic letter to Max Ernst, which began with the salutation, "Dearest Max Ernst, dearest Max." And he copied this, Max, in the Vox Angelica painting. A surrealist self-portrait of the artist, dream and revolution.
You open your eyes and you look to the outside world. You can see another way. You close your eyes and you look into your inner world. And I believe the best to do is to have one eye closed and to look inside, and this is the inner eye. With the other eye, you have it fixed on reality, what is going on around in the world. If you can make a kind of a synthesis of these 2 important worlds, you come to a result which can be considered as the synthesis of objective and subjective life.
For the invitations, we used an extraordinary photo by Frederick Sommer, a double exposure of Max in front of the studio wall. We also exhibited all the originals of Une Semaine de Bonté, a week of goodness, which actually means a week in which everything is cheaper. These were 7 fantastical stories which he had published as a picture novel in 1934. Max had used cuttings from illustrations to sentimental 19th century novels for these collages. From a practical financial point of view, the show was the greatest fiasco of all. It snowed in Beverly Hills the day we opened the Max Ernst exhibition. It had never snowed before in Beverly Hills, and I'm sure it's never going to snow there again. Max's favorite painting at the time was Day and Night, which he referred to as pure delight in painting.
To listen to the heartbeats of the earth, to yield to that fear which comets and the unknown inspire in men, to put out the sun at will, to light the searchlights of night's brain, to enjoy the cruelty of one's eyes, to see by the soft gleam of the lightning the majesty of the trees, to invoke the fireflies.
After a sojourn in the Nevada desert, Max Ernst begins a series of tiny landscape paintings, the size of postage stamps, which he entitles Microbes. He is overjoyed at the idea of soon being able to travel to a show carrying his works in a matchbox in his trouser pockets. Seven years later, 7 microbes viewed through a temperament, a minuscule volume of pictures and poems by Ernst, is published in Paris.
Seen with the naked eye, this rock is 2 times younger than its age. For your beautiful naked eyes, he decks himself in feathers of lead and a new secretive sky every day. Viewed through a temperament, he begins to blush, turns purple, cries and screams and roars into the silence of the room like an irate pyramid that laughs twice in a century, laughs with white, cloudy laughter. Then its groundless laughter bursts like a terrifying love song between 2 beds of ice.
In 1952, Max Ernst accepts an invitation from the University of Hawaii in Honolulu. His extempore lectures, about 30 all told, on the influence of so-called primitive art on the art of our age, are attended by about 150 students from many nations. He also holds a show of paintings there on the subject of volcanoes. During the show, Hawaii is actually shaken by strong volcanic eruptions. In a letter to his sister Lonnie in Berlin, he writes,
"It has been quite a pleasant summer, full of inhuman flora and erupting volcanoes. But all of it much too gentle, even the volcanoes. You can stand at the edge of the crater and watch it spit fire in an ever so obliging way, and see white birds of paradise playing among the fountains of flame." When peace returned, and I had become an American citizen,